evening. Welcome to Community and Technology, where we connect the global community with news, information, and resources that will help improve your life. I'm Stu Reid. Here with my co-host, Dave Burstein. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Stu. What do we got today?
Well, there's been some recent studies about cognitive decline and medical approaches to help work with that. I know you've been looking at medical issues for a while on the show. So why don't you talk about what this study shows?
Yeah, I've got so much AI stuff. I deliberately start with some of the medical stuff, which is also very important. The first story is that COVID had resulted in cognitive decline. There's significant worsening of working memory and what you observe during the first year of the pandemic. Now, did that mean COVID was affecting your mind? Not necessarily. They found that during COVID, people did less exercise, increased alcohol use, were lonely more often, and depressed more often, all of which are things that could cause a loss of memory and cognitive function.
Sure. And I don't know if you said this, but just a big decrease in interaction and social interaction. That was, I mean, to me, my experience, it was, even though we started doing the Zoom and the virtual interaction, huge break, slowdown in just relating to people, talking to people, and being with people. That had to have a psychological effect.
Yep. Next medical story. A new drug going into, it was in level 2 testing, but they stopped it because the results were so good. It's called veracidemolib or something like that.
With a V, veracidemolib, something like that, right? With a V.
And in a brain cancer study, there was a huge difference between the people who got a placebo and people got the medicine.
What were they treating, Dave?
Well, the article I have here says without the new medicine, people survived for 11 months.
And this is cancer patients, correct?
Brain cancer.
Brain cancer. Okay.
And with the medicine, they averaged 27 months.
Wow.
Of survival. And we don't know whether it's even better than that, because at that point, they stopped studying. The FTC put it on a fast track to get it out there. Again and again, I keep coming into these medical stories because I read them, some from the Times, some from Nature, some from the New England Journal, and so on. And I'm seeing remarkable progress on a lot of things. And what does that apply to you? Well, only the best doctors get the first information and first access to trials. So strongly recommend you get a good doctor who stays on top of things. Most of those are university affiliated, and meet them. Meet them now if you don't have one. If you don't have a doctor you trust, don't just keep going to the same clinic because they're okay. Get a good doctor. Now, youth pulled up a story that I had seen about what happens when you ban cell phones in school.
Yeah, that was kind of interesting. Just in Florida, in a school district, which includes a school called Timber Creek High School in Orange County, Florida. Well, just a backstory. in May, Florida passed a law that required public schools to impose rules barring use of cell phones, student use of cell phones during class time. And this fall, the Orange County, which includes this particular school where the reporter did some research, went even further, barring students from using cell phones during the entire school day. So throughout the day, no matter if in the lunchroom, out in the schoolyard, on break, no cell phones. And yeah, there was a mixed reaction. The teachers seemed like uniformly they embraced it. They said things like there's more engagement, they're getting more eye contact, one-on-one with the students. They had seen previously in this particular school a lot of bullying, which was facilitated by filming events and putting it on TikTok and other social media platforms. So that has virtually disappeared. Folks are
disappeared or just disappeared during the school day?
Disappeared during the school day. Yeah, I can't say it eliminated altogether. Yeah, yeah.
And bullying is a topic that one of our colleagues on the Internet Society board thinks one of the key things we should address, but it's a hard thing to figure out. That's right.
One of the teachers said the ban has made the atmosphere at Timber Creek more pastoral. The more eye contact, the students respond when they're greeted by the teachers. And this particular teacher says that they love it. Students are more talkative and more collaborative because they're not so engaged with their phones. But of course, the reaction was not universally one of acceptance and love. A number of students are saying, well, you're treating us like kids. We should be responsible for using the device. How are we going to learn how to use the device responsibly?
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
They are kids.
Yeah, they are kids, Dave. You're right. You're right.
When you get into college, everybody's texting away all the time and ignoring the.
Yeah, you're right. But these kids are pretty sophisticated, even though they are kids. And one young lady is quoted as saying, "Imagine that the device used on a daily basis to communicate with other people is completely gone," said Catalina, age 13, Dave, 8th grader at the middle school. She and her, I feel it feels completely isolating. But I think that's to the very point and the rationale behind why the ban. Well, we want to connect with each other one-to-one, people to people, and not over the device. That's the whole reason why this ban was put in place. So
it's not clear whether there's a disease called internet addiction, or it's just some of us are really into it and have a really hard time stopping. But there definitely is a whole lot of people, including probably 3/4 of the teenagers in America, who cannot go away from their cell phone happily and start freaking out. Like somebody addicted to nicotine and they can't get a cigarette, they start freaking out. What should be done? The Chinese have gotten really serious about it. They have made the game companies, for example, prevent anybody playing a game more than 2 hours a night, maybe 2 hours a week. But in America, we've been taken over. But it's not just the kids. I have a friend that and she's not always on her text, but it seems like she's always. People like that, don't you?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Fortunately, most of the folks, our generation, Dave, this stuff came to us late. So I didn't get addicted like so many others did. But there are some of our generation, some of my peers are very much living in their devices and constantly back and forth with text messaging and on the social media platforms. I look at my son. He's in his young 40s, and he uses the platforms a lot. But I think he's a budding a businessman, an entrepreneur, and most of his activity is kind of starting to focus on his work and moving that forward, as opposed to just pure social interactions. But I did see another story, Dave, that kind of related to this, that talked about how millennials, slightly older folks, they define millennials between the ages of 27 and 42, are starting to pull away from social media and starting to not use it nearly as much as they used to. This particular writer, he's a writer for Wired magazine, a publication I'm sure you know, talked about the we're in the twilight era of social media, and he's saying that the party is over, that folks are kind of jaded and tired of using it. And I think with the Musk takeover of Twitter, that was one of the things that this writer cited as kind of the last straw for him to just kind of pull away from social media. I'm wondering whether or not you've seen that trend. I have not, but I'm wondering, have you seen that?
Well, Twitter is down 13% since before Elon Musk. So it's
You
not it's
you
not a
talking about
total
usage
decline.
or value, dollars?
Usage, it's down in value something like 70%
Wow.
because advertisers don't want to be associated with some of the stuff going on
Hmm.
there. I've got a story about Grok, Elon Musk's new AI program, but we'll get to that.
Hmm.
Uh, Facebook is flat to down in users in the
Hmm.
United States. Uh, and I can see why. They're so overloaded with ads.
Hmm.
Facebook, I almost never go to anymore. And I'm starting to get fed up with YouTube because it has so many ads.
Yes, it does.
But overall use of social media, TikTok's still growing very fast.
Hmm.
Times found another social media one, which they said lots of people were signing up to.
Hmm.
So it's not gone.
Yeah,
Only connect.
interesting. So, I mean,
Okay.
back to the school story. What's your feeling on that, Dave? I think I come down. I worked in public school as a teacher for a while. I did a substitute teacher for several years while I was kind of finding my way in my early business ventures, and mostly a middle school, a junior high school. And at that time, this is going back in the 80s, cell phones were not even in existence, and there was no social media. So, I don't have a real world baseline to compare it to, but just looking at the young folks today and just how engrossed they are in the devices, uh, I think I come down on the side of the ban. I think it's a good idea. Maybe we need to look at it over time and see the long-term reaction. In that particular school district in Florida, the kids could go to the principal's office if there were an emergency or they had to get in touch with their family, their parents, whatever. They could go to the principal's office and get access to their device. So it wasn't like they were totally cut off in terms of emergency situation, whether it be medical or what have you. Um, but I think just to kind of get the kids focused on learning and focus on people interaction as opposed to electronic interaction, I think the band's a good idea.
Well, if in fact the main thing of school is to connect you with other people, getting rid of cell phones will probably help. But it's not so clear the main purpose of school is to get you connected. And in most cases, it's not to get you learn reading, writing, and the other subjects they try to teach. Remember that most schools, certainly in the early days when we started getting free elementary education in the United States, in Boston, in New York, primary purpose, according to the people who were getting the funding for those schools was to turn kids into model workers,
Hmm.
that they come all coming off the farm where they set their own times, and they have to learn to follow the clock and take orders all day long. So maybe that's the reason the kids are spending so much time. What's being taught in school isn't being presented to them in any way they would want it.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, and I think what you're saying and what I'm hearing is that what's going on in school doesn't is not resonating with kids in terms of their needs. But I would argue that, okay, well, let's redo the curriculum. Let's transform what goes on in the schools so that the activity is more relevant to the kids. The model that you described earlier, training kids to be good workers. I think that's a mid 20th century type of thinking that no longer is relevant. No longer has real legs. In my mind, school has a couple issues. One is to socialize kids, to grow them, to teach them to be leaders, to make decisions, to grow their own just kind of internal skills as people. And part of that is interacting with other people and how to interact, how to be a leader, how to work in groups, how to work with other people. I think all of that are the really important social skills that should be taught in schools. And along with that is I guess some of the content stuff, the reading, writing, arithmetic curriculum pieces that certainly are valuable and certainly will help with that, find a job or find work. I think one of the things that, was missing when I was in school, and I'm seeing it a little bit more now, you're seeing it with some of the STEM education and STEAM education that has kind of come to the forefront. And that is teaching young people about all the options they have in life, other than just getting a job, a job, and other than just working for somebody else. Working for their own creative needs, to fulfill their own creative needs, to build their own business, to follow their own minds and hearts in terms of what they want to do with their life. That's the kind of thing that I'd like to see structured into curriculum. And you see in some of the really progressive schools, but it's sorely lacking. So many schools are just babysitting factories, places to warehouse the kids while the parents go to work, and that's a shame.
I saw Saturday a movie called Radical,
Mm.
that I think is hitting theaters for a week and then on Netflix after that. Netflix is doing a lot of that. So I went to a preview.
Hmm.
And that was exactly about this. A teacher was so dedicated, he changed how he was taught the students in his school. He had just gotten there, new
Hmm.
teacher this year. It had been one of the lowest rated schools in the district in Mexico.
In Mexico, okay.
Okay. And by the end of one year, one of his students, a girl named Paloma, had scored number one in the standard tests they made all students take after sixth grade in the entire country.
Wow.
Oops. And the average score went from one of the lowest out there to way above average.
Hmm.
What do you think the new teacher, did?
I don't know. I would say, first you would start with going to the kids and meeting them where they are and seeing what they want to do and what are their dreams, what are their ambitions and working from that. But how did this guy do it?
He did that really strong. He threw out the textbook and the lesson plans he was supposed to teach.
Mm-hmm.
He said, they're just teaching this for the test, and I want to, and memorizing things for the test isn't going to do anybody any good in life.
Right.
Might help our teachers get a bonus,
Mm-hmm.
but it's not helping the kids.
Mm-hmm.
So we do a thing that is a small movement around the world called inverting the classroom. That rather than a teacher lecturing, teacher persuaded the kids to teach,
Mm.
to think about what they knew about the subject, sometimes after reading the book, the textbook, sometimes after going to the library and picking things up there, and mostly listening to each other and trying to think about subjects.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Absolutely brilliant, well acted movie.
Mm. What's the name
Uh,
again, Dave? The name of the movie?
Radical.
Radical.
Definitely radical changes in education.
Mm-hmm.
It had its subtitles, but it wasn't a problem. It started a little slow, but a few minutes into it, I realized it was an extraordinary film
Mm-hmm.
because of the theme of involving students in their education and showing how they did it,
Mm-hmm.
and because of some of the best acting that I've seen, and I've seen a lot of good acting lately. Uh, I don't know whether the teacher is going to be up for an Oscar. I've seen a number of films that are going to be up and have their characters up for an Oscar. Uh, and there's a couple more coming. Jenny said the Scorsese has two bravura performances. I didn't go and see that one.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that's also hitting theaters for a brief while, and then going to be on Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
But getting back to the classroom, Dave, that's fascinating in my mind. You know, my best experiences in the classroom was when I learned from the students. When the students were so engaged that they were sharing their experiences, sharing stories, and you know, the kids, the young people have so much, they know so much, they've experienced so much, and to the degree that they can involve their own lives in what they're learning, it has so much more meaning for them. And you know, the other thing that I think is really important is critical thinking and problem solving. And you don't teach that with a book. You don't teach that. You don't tell that to kids. You engage them and get them to do it. That's how that evolves and happens.
it's everything I know. I've never been a teacher except small technical classes. Says you're right on target. Involving people in the school gets them to do much better in school. And the kids, and there's so many examples of lousy schools made better. And there's so many examples if the teacher doesn't think the kids are going to be able to learn, oh, this is a terrible school, these kids can't learn anything, does really badly. And then you get that you give teachers like that
Yeah.
things like inaccurate test scores that showed their students were testing way above average.
Mm-hmm.
They thought the students were doing well, and the students did much
Yeah,
better
yeah, yeah,
when the
sure.
teachers
And
didn't
yeah,
see that.
expectations drive outcomes in so many ways, both on the teacher side and on the student side. If the student doesn't believe that they can do it, or doesn't believe that they've got the wherewithal, then they're not going to do it. So I mean, it works on both sides of the equation, and we got to do the best that we can to really help the kids be strong and positive about who they are and what they think about themselves, so they can move forward in life. So, Dave, I think we got to take a break here. This is a fascinating subject. We started off talking about cell phones in schools, and how that interferes with or helps education. But we're going to take a brief break, and when we come back, I want to talk. Maybe we'll switch up and talk a little bit about AI. Want to talk about what's going on with the internet bans over in the war in Gaza, and how technology is playing a role there. So, this Community Technology on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem, with Dave Burstein and Stu Reid. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after a brief musical break. Okay, we're back. Community Technology with Dave Burstein and Stu Reid. I want to pick up, Dave, with some of the latest going on with AI. One of the stories I ran across when AI was asked to create images of Black African doctors treating white kids. And what do you think happened?
It couldn't do it.
Couldn't do it. It was just a total disconnect in terms of how that system works. They were asked to
A
show
whole lot
traditional.
of bias.
Yeah.
Bias is something that is still a huge problem in AI. It reflects the bias in our society and what's on the internet. And conscientious people are doing their best to eliminate that bias, but it's still extreme.
Mm-hmm.
Did you
You know,
ever see
the researcher said he wanted to see if AI could come up with images that flip this stereotype of, quote, white saviors or the suffering Black kids. We wanted to invert your typical global health tropes. This is what the researcher said. And despite the way that they asked the question, show traditional African healers helping poor and sick white children, the AI program almost always depicted the children as Black. I mean, we're just a perpetual
and
victims, Dave.
and what did the doctors look like?
They said that some of the doctors were Black, but a lot of them were white as well. I mean, the algorithm just had a hard time flipping the stereotype because it's just built into the learning of the AI systems.
Absolutely. In their whole article, which was long, they had example after example of being very specific, saying
Mm-hmm.
things like Black doctor and white students, but the AI couldn't deal with that. AIs make a lot of mistakes, more than most people
Yeah.
realize.
Yeah, but this is more than a mistake, Dave. This is really some built-in bias, some built-in racism. It's not just a mistake. I think that just kind of sugarcoats what the system is doing when it does this. Is very insidious in that it essentially is doing what society does, and that is cast a whole race of people as victims, as on the bottom, and a whole nother race of people as the saviors and the experts that know the answers to the problems. I mean, it's very insidious.
Let me pull that. This is the most remarkable week in the history of AI, probably.
Mm-hmm.
A whole lot of big things happened, and I'll try to cover them quickly. But let's start with one that's related to that. I I'm covering Washington and all the policy stuff here, and everybody in Washington prefaces, "Well, we're battling other countries. We have to maintain our lead." Uh, a guy who worked in the White House making this policy says he thinks that we're going to try to keep China in particular 3 to 5 years behind us. And we're doing things like blockading the best AI chips going there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the pieces of news I have this week, which hasn't been picked up like most of the big AI stories, is an article in Nature magazine, very prominent science magazine, 150 years old, which does a whole lot of fact checking and peer review.
Mm-hmm.
He printed an article that seems impossible, that a group of uh, scientists at a big university had come up with an analog photonic chip that was 100%, 100 times as fast as the existing chips on computer vision models and used 1,000 times less electricity. Now, that
But
sounds
Dave,
too
this
good.
sounds impossible, Dave. This sounds like science fiction.
This is too good to be true. And that was why I told you first that it passed peer review at Nature.
Mm-hmm.
The people on it, there were about 12 people on it, had some senior faculty, mostly senior faculty. And what university do you think they're at?
MIT, Stanford.
Tsinghua in Beijing.
Okay. Uh,
Okay.
throw that
Uh,
5 years behind out the window, huh, Dave? How about 10 years ahead?
well, this one is such a big breakthrough. If it proves producible and really proves out, it's a huge thing. And people have been working on using photonics, using light waves instead of the electricity for a long time. People have been working on analog. In fact, in 5G antennas, they came up with a analog system instead of a digital system that looked really good when I looked at it about 3 years ago. So it's not impossible that there was a huge breakthrough
Mhm. So Dave,
in China.
let me just understand high level. This chip works on light wave as opposed to electrical impulses. Is that correct?
Yep, and light waves go at the speed of light,
Right. Well,
and they
so does
can generate
electricity.
a lot of heat.
So does electricity, but
Electricity actually in the chip has some delays.
okay.
The thing you're thinking is the speed of light in a vacuum,
Hmm.
but a chip is going through a whole lot of copper, silver, silicon dioxide, and things like that to get from one spot to another,
Okay.
and that slows it down.
Hmm.
In fact, and I've been looking at this. Uh, I read most of the articles coming in AI very quickly because last week I got 35 new articles in one day.
Wow.
And that is actually, there's 100,000 people researching AI because it's that exciting and
Hmm.
has that potential. Uh, it's swamped. I would say between 20 and 25% of all the articles are coming from China,
Hmm.
almost as many as from the United States. And
Hmm.
I'm not talking about garbage stuff, although there's a lot of garbage in all of this, but serious, important work. If you include Chinese trained scientists who grew up in China, some of whom went to Tsinghua, uh, who have now went to graduate school in the US. And 10 years ago, everybody wanted to come to graduate school in the US. That number went up to 30 to 40%, maybe 30 to 35%. And in fact, why everybody in Washington, Commerce Secretary, the Vice President, and so on, talks about how far ahead we are. They have to say we're ahead before they talk about the changes they wanted, because they don't want anybody to think that they're criticizing the ability of American scientists.
Hmm.
Uh, for all practical purposes, on AI at least, which is what I know best, China's caught up with us.
Okay,
We
tell me
may have
again the metrics, Dave, of this chip that just got announced. You said it's 100 times faster than current technology. Is that right?
on a particular vision test,
Okay.
and they believe they're going to be faster in a whole lot of things, but they had to, this chip was built just as they have only a couple of lab samples at this point, and they're really testing it thoroughly. There's going to be more. We're going to hear more, and I'll be able to bring that here. But there's no reason that somebody born in Shenzhen or Shanghai or Chengdu is stupider than somebody born in San Jose or Chicago. And Washington is coming up with a lot of bad policy because they don't get that. They have to
Hmm.
think Americans are
Hmm.
special.
So, Dave, is
Now,
this chip? Is this the announcement that you're talking about? I know you kind of previewed the AI discussion when you think there's going to be some big developments this week. Is that what it is?
that's just one of them.
Okay.
The second one comes from OpenAI that does ChatGPT. Two things they came up with. They had the developers day yesterday. Yesterday? No, Monday. Uh, and I've been reading nothing but there's a lot of publications I read on AI. One of the things that makes a big difference is they are dropping all their prices 50 to 70%
Mm.
because there's a lot of competition.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Facebook has some good stuff, Google has some good stuff. Uh, but also because they're getting better and better at the software and the chips. So it's costing less to run. So the prices are coming down enough, and that changes what's realistic. There are people who are saying there's too much energy, it's too expensive to run much on AI. Lots of people in AI are working on finding more efficient software, smaller models, 13 billion parameters instead of 70 billion, and getting almost the same results. The
Mm-hmm.
second thing is that OpenAI released a whole slew of things to make it easy to tune your database, taking their $100 million worth of training and adding information that's right for you. I could put in 20 years of writing about telecom, and it would know a lot more about telecom than the basic training. That's called tuning, and that's working quite well. You
Mm-hmm.
could put in all the tech. Somebody just did put in 250,000 queries that went to the leading medical library and their answers, and said and showed that they got better results on testing in medicine. But the other thing is much more general, and they did it really well, and it's going to happen all the place. Agents. Right now, AI is great. It can read almost everything and write almost anything. Not brilliantly, but as good as a typical college student, usually a little flat and boring. Beside writing, it can draw. They are really scared that most illustrators are going to be replaced, and that is already happening.
Mm-hmm.
In the last 3 or 4 months, the AIs have been shown that they can see with their vision, their sensors,
Mm-hmm.
and talk. That instead of giving you your response in text, it can actually talk to you with your answers.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be quite good. So that we had the extension of AI from the great stuff that everybody saw. And just in the last 6 months, there's big changes. Now, if you, instead of going about seeing and creating, talking, writing, what would happen if the AI could get constant feeds, say, from the LiDAR and the cameras on top of a car that's for autonomous driving?
Well, I'm hopefully, the car vehicle would move more safer and less accidents, and just general improvement in the operation.
What happens if you have to uh, do a medical experiment that's working with incredibly small quantities, which they do in a lot of the genetic testing, that have to be done exactly right and to figure it out? Well, what's happening then is the AI has gone beyond see, hear, write, draw, talk to make agents. And they've been talking about, oh, it could make your restaurant reservations for you. And oh, it can summarize the meeting that you just had. But what's different now is that instead of just the stuff the AI can read, it can get regular feedback and get out there to make change. In particular, how do you get an AI that can affect the real world directly? You put the software on a robot.
Okay.
And there are big improvements in robotics that take the AI software and apply it to robotics. And that way, it's an embodiment of what you can do with AI, and it can move and pick and place. That's just starting to come. And that's the second thing that Google released this week. Very powerful software for making those agents. It's designed to be simple enough that somebody in business can program it. Doesn't need heavy duty programming as most robotics do. Mm-hmm. And they're working on things like the robot can, when presented with something that it hadn't seen before, but had been trained on billions of examples, can probably do what it has to do with a lot of accuracy, even though it hasn't seen it before. Mm-hmm. So that if there's a new sign on the road that it never saw that sign, it can read, its camera can read that sign, it can throw it through the AI that's in the car and probably get it right what it has to do.
Well, that sounds like problem solving. That's interesting. Yeah.
And that's starting to work in robotics and so on. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, the fourth big story, or fourth big reason this week, is Elon Musk, because he knew that the OpenAI stuff was going to be really exciting, gave folks a preview of the AI he's building, or his company is building, that works in a demo. There no public availability at all. He thinks it's going to be better in a number of ways. That he said, among other things, it can have all the data of everybody's stuff in Twitter, which can give you really good ideas about what people are thinking right now. Say, was right after the polls close on election day, and so. And he's going to put in more pornography and sex and violence.
Really? Wow. Thanks a lot, Elon. Well, we need that, right?
The polite way he says it is he's not going to have all the guardrails. In fact, the big AI software is definitely trying to do things like make it hard for you to figure out or to find instructions on how to build a bomb that could blow up an entire building if you put the fuel oil in a truck. Mm-hmm. And they now have, as I say, it can speak and hear. So it's getting pretty good.
Wow.
At holding conversations with you. Well, people, of course, are falling in love with it. And one of the things that's starting to happen is people are talking sex with it, just as they always have. The internet is for porn. And he's going to make it easier to do that, allow profanity, reduce the guardrails, and so on.
Wow,
I
can't say I'm looking forward to that day, but it's going to be interesting.
It was certainly worth bringing to the show.
Yeah.
Now,
okay,
how much time do we have?
We're almost out of time, Dave. Before we go, I wanted you to talk just briefly about technology and what's going on in Gaza with the war and internet blockage and related issues. We got about 2 minutes.
The story that started you thinking here was from Wired about how the Israelis are blocking the internet going into Gaza.
Mhm.
And some of the Israelis said, "Oh no, we're not doing it." The data on this is very clear. Among other things, articles in the Times. There are not many reporters on the ground what they're putting there, and they can't get information they need at the refugee help and the nonprofits working in Gaza or the hospitals in Gaza. They
Mhm.
want to look up something in medicine. Much of the time, because all the internet coming in to Gaza and the West Bank has to come through Israel first. And well, they don't want people in Gaza knowing what's going on.
Mhm.
They don't want the rest of the world to hear that 3,000 kids have died in the bombing. Kids. We're not talking about Hamas fighters and even adults, of which at least 10,000 have died. We're talking about things that Israelis don't want to get out there.
Mhm. You know that they claim, Dave. They claim that what I've read, this Israelis claim that it's a tactical, military reasons why they are blocking the internet. That they are, want to control the communications that the enemy might be able to do defensively or offensively. Yeah, it sounds like you're not buying that, or maybe the collateral damage is not worth it. Is that what you're saying?
Well, one third of the buildings in the east part of Gaza, this is straight from the Times, they look the satellite photos. One third of the buildings in the largest city in Gaza have been hit
Mm,
by artillery or aerial bombs or
mm,
rockets.
wow.
Now, obviously, and all the electricity is gone most of the time, which also has to come through Israel. Gaza does not give it doesn't have electric plants. Israelis insist that they buy it. I'm actually not 100% sure they don't have any electric plant, but they might. And last thing I want to throw on this is that I've been watching what happened. I'm Jewish. I'm very aware of what's happening to and by my people in Israel and what's happening between them and Arabs. Spoken about it sometimes here. One of the things that I can tell you has happened is that the Israelis have total control of the phone systems in Palestine, Gaza, and the West Bank. There is a PALTEL, Palestine telephone, but they are kept deliberately far behind the Israeli networks that also go to all of Palestine because we're talking about a very small country.
Mhm.
And when we're talking the what the Israeli networks put up on their towers in Jerusalem goes to Arab East Jerusalem fine. And so when we were in East Jerusalem, a lot of people were using the Israeli network instead of the Palestine network. Because the Palestine network at that point was 3G only.
Mhm.
3G is really struggling to do lots of what we do every day, watching video on the internet. We're talking YouTube and education and so on. It was, and they years and went years and years after Israel itself went to 4G, they were still holding the Palestinian networks at 3G, so it was harder to do anything. They wanted to keep Palestine to that.
Mhm.
And in fact, I don't know if there was any 4G in the West Bank, definitely not in Gaza, uh, even while Israel itself was moving to 5G. So, what's right and wrong in Palestine and Israel? You're going to make up your own mind about that. But in this show, we can describe the facts on the ground and what's going on.
So thanks, Dave. Thanks to our listening audience out there. This has been Community and Technology on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem, every Wednesday, 5 p.m. Stay tuned. You just might learn something. Thanks. Good night.